Welcome to Life and Love Nuggets, where licensed therapists Brent and Janis Sharp share how you can thrive in your life, your love, and your relationships.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Life and Love Nuggets. You know, our whole focus is to help people thrive as individuals and also thrive in their relationships. And so we've been working on this series. This is kind of the fourth part of that series now. We've been talking about parents and their adult children and our parents. And we're focusing today specifically on how do we accept our parents. A great quote from Oscar Wilde says, "Children start out loving their parents, but as they grow older and discover their parents are human, they become judgmental. And sometimes when they mature, they forgive their parents, especially when they discover they themselves are also human." And so,
I love that.
That was very good. So just as parents have really idealistic visions about their children, children have idealistic ideas of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're little, they're like gods. I mean, they're the closest thing to understanding God that we have. I mean,
they control everything.
They control everything. They're all powerful. They provide everything. They even carry you around for years, and they feed you and they clothe you, and so that's why it's kind of a tangent, but that's why we even talk about even people's understanding of God.
Yeah.
You know, that we've got this really big responsibility because we are to represent in the best possible way the nature of God, and because that's how little kids see their parents, and as toddlers we imitate them. We do everything they did. You know, I remember my dad was a colonel in the Army, and I remember when I was little, I don't know, I was 3 maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 maybe, and we have this picture of me in his helmet, which basically came down to my mouth, and his shirt, his Army fatigue shirt, which went all the way to the floor, and his boots that covered all of my legs. Big smile on my face because I was imitating Dad. And so we have these amazing kind of fantastical thoughts and images of our parents initially.
Yes, and we think what they do is great.
Yeah.
I remember loving my mom's big pearl earrings, and she would wear a hat to church, a hat and white gloves to church.
Wow.
And I didn't think it was fair because, I realize this was in the 60s, but I didn't think it was fair because I only got to wear a hat at Easter and white gloves at Easter. And so I was really looking forward to being like that. So as we're growing up, even as we're forming language and learning about the world and how it fits together, we're getting most of our information from our environment, specifically from our parents. So as we begin the differentiation process, we begin to see things in them that we don't like. And as we're growing and we're defining or creating our identity apart from our parents, we go through that natural process of I am me and I'm not my parent. All of us have to go through that. And we go through it in different stages, throughout our childhood. But we often become judgmental of our parents. When we begin to get old enough, we start comparing them to other parents. So, Susan's parents let her do this and this and this. And we get to eat this when we're at their house. They don't care if we eat sugar or we have pop. Or, oh my gosh, Susan's parents are so mean. I'm so glad that my parents aren't like that. But we're trying to make sense of ourselves and where we fit, and we're trying to make sense of the world. As we get into school, we begin to become aware of who we are in relationship to other people. We find out there's other people who are smarter than we are, or faster, or more attractive than we are. I always say when people go, oh, you praise your kids too much, or I will always say, no, all they have to do is go to school. Right. And any conceit that's there is going to pretty much get knocked out of them. Yeah. But I remember one of our little girls coming home. I don't know if you know this, remember this, but
I do.
One of our little girls coming home, and as she gets in the car, she's crying really hard, and she goes, I'm not the prettiest girl in the world. Kate is. And as we talked some more, I found out that James, the boy she really liked Kate. And so here she was, this little 4-year-old, K4, heartbroken over him liking Kate more than her. Yeah. And she assumed that was because Kate was the prettiest girl in the world. Now, I also found out later as we got home that she had a fever 103. So I think that may have had something to do with the drama over Kate.
Yes. So we spend a lot of our life accepting who we are as people, or trying to accept who we are as people and who others are. But as we're fighting and kind of to figure out ourselves, we seem to have this idea that older people should all have their acts together. Grown-ups should be fully formed. They should be completely healthy in all ways. And if we see things in them we don't like, we tend to fight hard to become not like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't like what we see, but they are our parents. And we want to love them and accept them. And so how do we do that?
Well, I think this experience of differentiation, we see this a lot in toddlers. And I say we see a lot in 15-year-olds. This conflict between I'm myself, but you need to take care of me.
Yeah.
So toddlers can throw a tantrum and go, I do this myself. Or as our little Emma would say, walk away, Grammy, walk away. But then they run over to you if they have a boo-boo and you're supposed to kiss it and you're supposed to fix it. Or then they want to cuddle with you so that you can watch Frozen for the 900th time in your life.
Yes.
So after the tantrum comes that, no, maybe I don't want to be separate. I want to be back with you again. And 15-year-olds, it's a hard time developmentally. You know, the Gazelle Institute at Harvard calls this one of the years of disequilibrium, which basically means their body and their brain are changing so much that they're just kind of out of sorts.
A little off.
Yeah, they may be a little bit clumsy, but they feel that. They feel that everything in their world, their bodies, everything just doesn't fit. It doesn't seem right. So a 15-year-old can throw a tantrum of their own or be rude or snotty or, no, Mom, what are you thinking about that? And get really upset with you. And then a half an hour later, just kind of amble into the living room and go, hey, can I sit by you and watch a movie? And the parents going, really? After all I went through? Really? But as we mature into teens and young adulthood, we begin to get more of a sense of who we are. You know, I think high school and college is an age where we can tend to feel, I knew it was in there somewhere. It would come. Yeah. We tend to feel invincible. You know, that's why a 16-year-old car can drive his car recklessly with the radio blaring or their, earpods in, listening to music. And it's like, no, I'm fine. No, it's not going to be okay. There's nothing wrong. You know, when we get into those high school and college years, we begin to think we have the world figured out. And bless their hearts, our dorky old parents just don't get it.
They don't get it. Now, in previous podcasts, we talked about how our culture has impacted each generation, and that has impacted our beliefs and our parenting. And so, we were a few years behind this, but not too far behind the hippies and protests over the Vietnam War. But one of the slogans at the time was, don't trust anyone over 30. And so I think that added to our idealism about life, that we're going to do things different. Yeah. You know, we're going to do it the right way.
We're going to fix this place.
And our parents just don't have it all figured out. And so, that slogan's laughed about a little bit now, but I think it's still a bit of an unspoken view that young people have. And I think for adult children, again, thinking about their parents, I think we just have to keep this in mind. I think also it's reinforced by technological advances and differences. When young adults or even kids are more tech savvy than their parents, and definitely their grandparents.
Here, Grammy, just do this.
Yeah, exactly. How can you not know this? Right? I know more than you do is kind of what it begins to put in us, and we begin to have a little bit of a negative attitude then towards those that just don't know how to do something that is intuitive to us. And so, again, just recognizing that this is a thing. And so we've seen, in our practice of people in their late 20s or 30s as they become adults, we see our parents as more human. We begin to potentially see a context for their background. We start to see more family patterns that they were raised in and the impact of that and how that's impacted their lives and even the way they parented us. And so, which I think is a good thing, is to be able to see through their eyes is really important in this.
Yeah, I remember it as I learned more about World War II and thought about all the young men going off to war and what it must have been like to have boys that you went to school with, and the Vietnam War as well, all wars, get killed, or to watch your neighbors. They talk about World War II, their neighbors would get a telegram, and you knew if they got a telegram that probably their son had died. And the pain of all of that, I think they had to shut down emotionally. They had to just survive. I was thinking the other day when we were watching, what's the show with the vets?
All Creatures, Great and Small.
Yes, and it showed a guy who was not able to fight in the war. Yeah. And I thought my dad was classified physically unable to fight in the war. And he looked healthy. And so what he must have gone through, the pain that he went through of not being able to serve when all of the other people around him, the other guys his age, were being served. So it was a painful time for people. And so it's no wonder that generation deadened a lot of their emotions. It's no wonder that they had the attitude of, life is tough, but you just work hard and you don't complain. Get over it. So as we become more aware of how our parents were raised and the things they went through, it helps us make sense of who they are. It helps us begin to see them more as people and just not as parents. In the midst of becoming an adult and we're getting jobs and we're having kids, we have a lot of comparisons that come up. I hear people go, I can't believe what my parents did. I can't believe they sent me to bed without supper. I would never do that with my kids. Or sadly, I hear they whipped us with a belt. So we see things now that are abuse that were called normal at the time. It's what parents were doing. And that's not to minimize abuse. I mean, abuse is wrong. It was wrong and it is wrong. And so if any of you had a traumatic upbringing, we're not suggesting look at your parents more positively and get over it. Trauma has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about is a fairly normal, how do you define that? Right. Fairly healthy adults and their children. But as we become adults, we start to question why our parents did some of the things that they did or said some of the things. So why did they encourage this child to go to college, but not that child? Why did they criticize my weight? Or I hear from people, why did my parents put my sister on a diet when she was really young to make sure she wasn't chubby? I mean, that just seems so wrong.
Yeah.
And, the classic line, what will the neighbors think?
Yeah.
Why did they care so much about what the neighbors thought? Maybe they knew their neighbors and we don't tend to know ours anymore. But many of the things that our parents did, they learned from their parents. Or they were trying hard to not be like their parents and they made some mistakes in the same way. Basically, because they're human. They made mistakes. They didn't know what they were doing. Just like we don't know what we're doing a lot of times. Remember the terror and fear you have when you're given your first child of, oh my gosh, they're going to let me take this home?
You want us to take this home?
Do you know what you're doing?
We
You're
don't
professionals.
know what to do.
You shouldn't be giving me this child.
Oh, gosh.
But as desperately as we all want to be good parents, we messed up some things. I've told our kids that they can't write a memoir or anything about their childhood until after I'm dead. Yeah. Then they can say all the bad things that I did, but I just don't want it coming out before I'm dead.
Yes, and we also are stockpiling a little bit of money to help with their therapy costs.
Mm-hmm. And keeping notes. We kept notes when they were growing up, so we could tell our therapist there's a very good reason why we did those things.
So we become adults and question why our parents did what they did.
Mm-hmm.
But for many of our clients, we also hear stories about secrets that start coming out.
Yeah.
Things that were just covered up. We realized that, gosh, parents are drinking like way too much.
Yeah. Now, currently.
Yeah. And it's an excess, and it's all been covered up. Or I thought their marriage was great, and it wasn't so much. Or mom, or sometimes dad, didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
And didn't, he just went along to keep the peace. And some realize that their parents have ingrained prejudices.
Yeah.
That they didn't see while they were growing up. Or they find out that their parents were terrible with money, and they thought we were pretty affluent, and yet they spent everything, and now they don't have much. Or they were raised thinking their parents couldn't afford stuff, and they're putting a whole bunch of money in the bank, And so anyway, it's just kind of finding out stuff. There's even darker secrets that are coming out with dad had these affairs, or with DNA testing and stuff, all of a sudden realizing we've got some half siblings, that we didn't know about. It's like, what? My parents are not what I thought they were. What do we do with that? So we have to come to terms with our parents as flawed humans, just like we are.
Yeah.
We all have stuff. We all have broken places. It's all going to look a little bit different, but we all have it. They were products of their environment and choices and influence, just like we are, and we have to accept them for who they are. It really requires mercy. One of the definitions of mercy, which is a real foundation of forgiveness, which for many it is required to be able to forgive and release some of the hurts that they experience from parents. But one of the definitions of mercy is to get inside the skin of another person, to see what they see, feel what they feel, experience what they've experienced. So the more you can listen and hear and understand that, well, no wonder they didn't talk about feelings, because they went through some trauma here and had to learn to push that stuff away. And we're just more gracious when we understand what a person has gone through. And so the more we can see that and see what their experiences are, the better way we have of being able to love them.
But that doesn't mean that if they're doing something that's harmful to you or your family, that you can accept that.
Absolutely.
We have to have boundaries in all relationships. As you said earlier, good fences make good neighbors. So we have to have boundaries. It's not okay for your parents to drive your kids to school while they're impaired, either due to a substance or mental capacity, cognition issues.
Yes.
We'll say that just sounds so much better. We have to realize, though, we don't have control over who our parents are and what they do. It's just like we said in the last podcast. We said for parents of adult children, it's their life and not yours. But we do need to put to rest our own struggles with how they've hurt us in the past. Again, if there's abuse, you need to work with a trauma therapy to do this. Don't expect to do it on your own. There's not enough altar calls or reading the right thing enough in order for you to get over this. You really do need to talk to a trauma specialist. And there are some parents that it's healthy and appropriate to not have a relationship with them. And at some point down the road, we'll probably do a podcast on if you have difficult or toxic parents, how do you establish boundaries and decide whether to have a relationship with them or not.
That brings up the difference again between forgiveness and trust, that we can have the ability to forgive them when we're able to see kind of why they did what they did and release any offenses. But trust really does require them to change. And sometimes they don't. And we have no control over that. And so sometimes we do have to set bigger boundaries and not be together as often and those kind of things. And so it brings to bear all those.
Yeah. So we're talking about those of us that our parents caused us pain, but not necessarily trauma. And we have to accept that they're human. They had their own flaws just like we do. They made mistakes in their lives, in parenting, in relationships. But, we all loved our kids the best that we could. Our parents may not have loved us in the way that we would have liked to have been loved, but they did what they were capable of with all of their background. So some parents micromanaged because they were trying to protect their children. They didn't want their children to experience some of the pain that they went through. Others, as we talked about, were cold and distant because they didn't know how to express love and affection. They hadn't had it, and so they didn't know how to express that to their kids.
Yeah. And one of the things we hear a lot is that a parent is angry, and that can be mom or dad. But we have to realize that a lot of anger from parents is often a response to their anxiety, which is making certain judgments about the future based on current resources. And so if he can't keep his room clean now, how in the world is he going to be able to be a responsible person to be able to drive a car, or to get through college or to get married? And so they're actually projecting the fear of what this is going to mean. So the anger comes out in how I respond to you not cleaning your room. And so a lot of anger comes out of that, and recognize, again, it's just another way to have mercy. They were in fear. We're not suggesting that's okay. We're not suggesting that, we're not justifying or rationalizing anger. But oftentimes anger is felt as they don't love me, or I'm bad, or they don't really care. When actually it's oftentimes the opposite.
Yeah.
They care deeply, but they didn't know what to do with that. They didn't know what to do with that place of being unsure and being fearful about the future.
Well, and even though people can change, it's hard when you have a lot of ingrained habits and ingrained beliefs. And so as we're trying to have a relationship with our parents, as we're trying to heal from some of our own wounds, we have to stop expecting them to change. It's not that it's not possible, but so many of those things have been ingrained for so many years that they're probably not open to new things now. And we have to love them just as they are, even if we don't agree with them, even if we don't agree with what they're thinking or how they're living. It's really difficult right now in this highly politicized times. We'll have parents or other relatives that will say things that we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just said that. But if we're appalled by that, we can still love them as humans. They are loved by God, and they love you deeply. So it's loving them and accepting them, even though there's things that you're like, oh, I wish they wouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
If we can love them for who they are, it honors them for raising us in the best way that they possibly could, in the way that they were capable of doing it. But we also have to recognize as adults ourselves that we don't have to stay stuck in the unhealthy messages that we may have got from our parents. We do have a choice to learn and grow. We can't make them do that, but we have a choice to learn and grow and to heal from some of the past pain that we've experienced. So one of the things that I encourage people to do a lot is look for, which we've talked about before, look for anything positive that you can see in your parents.
So I want to leave you today with just a couple of practical action steps that can help us reframe how we interact with them and how we see them. And so the first one is, again, just kind of the opposite of what we shared in last podcast episode, which is recognizing that what we focus on determines our attitude. So if we just focus on the irritating things or the negative things or the things that have hurt us or whatever, we will have a negative attitude towards them. And so it's how do I get a picture of the positive qualities? And we just encourage them to do this for 30 days, just to try, see the impact of this, is to make a list of the qualities. It could be hard worker for a dad that was a little cold and distant. He was a hard worker. He was a good provider. He was, he protected us. So making a list of the top 5, or if you can, come up with the top 10 qualities of each of your parents and put it on a little card, stick it in your phone someplace. And we just encourage people for 30 days, just read over that with their name. Lord, thank you for them. Thank you for Dad. Thank you for him enduring hardships, for his ability to work so hard and to provide for us well, and just read through that list one time a day for 30 days, and just see if that doesn't soak in to you, where we get a different attitude. And then if there's times where you see them display one of those qualities, I always say, if you can verbalize that to them, Dad, thanks for working so hard and taking care of us kids. Not only is that speaking life to them, but you're reminding yourself, this is really who they are. This is the qualities that they possess. And it just can start softening us and put us in a little different perspective. And then we talked about this a couple times ago from a different direction, but I just want to remind us of this principle in communication. It's a communication principle that suggests that every one of us, whether we're 5 or 50 or 90, have a little parent part of our personality, an adult part of our personality, and a child part of our personality. And so this relates to how we communicate with a parent that's difficult. And so if we were to had a board up here, I would put parent, and then under that adult, then under that child. And then to the right of that, I would also put parent, adult, and child. Now, the parent part of us is, we say it's the critical, judgmental part of us. The adult is logical and reasoning. And the child is either compliant or rebellious. And so if we're communicating from one person to another, again, whoever they are, if I'm communicating from my parent, we talked previously about, if you're an adult parent, all parents are adults. if you're a parent of an adult child and you're speaking from that parent role, which you're being critical or judgmental, when we communicate from the parent, we're always communicating to their child. Now, if they were literally 5, we would expect compliance. But if that's the main way we speak to them when they're 15 or 25 or 35 or 55, then we're going to start pricking rebellion, and we will get fight or flight from them. Either they will shut down and pull away from us and not talk to us anymore, or they'll slip up into their parent and they'll try to parent you. You're so mean, or you do this, or whatever. And we get in what we call a circle 8 conversation. We've got 2 people trying to parent each other. Ugly. So on the other side of that, if you're an adult child and you have a parent that does speak to you that way, so you're on the right side of that chart and you're the receiver, and you mainly get criticism and judgment, and why did you do that, and why are you doing that, and you've never been very good at that, those kinds of statements. We just encourage you to kind of fight the fight or flight reaction, from pulling away and just never connecting with them, or just making sure you don't slip up into your parent and try to critique them.
Yeah.
We always say, if you can move to your adult, which would be things like, Dad, I feel like I'm being talked to like I'm 12 right now. We always encourage you to eliminate the you words out of the sentences. We decided to put our kids in the school here. It's our responsibility. And I feel like we're just getting criticized for that. Really pretty disheartening, hurtful, Oftentimes that will pull the other person down into their adults. It'll begin to alleviate some of that parental power that they're coming from. Now, sometimes you may just have to say it a few times. Dad, I'd rather not talk about this. It's our responsibility to decide on the kids. We decided to do this. Well, I just think I can't believe you guys did that. And, what kind of influence are they going to have in that school? And they need, or whatever. Dad, this is what we've decided. Our responsibility. Blah, 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 Dad, we're not going to talk about this. Hey, what do you think about the Cowboys next year? We change the subject. Usually, if you just keep coming, moving, and not letting your child that they're trying to talk to, of course, they want you to comply, go, oh, Dad, you're right. We'll just listen to you about everything now, Well, that's not generally going to happen,
Yeah.
But instead of reacting or trying to parent them, if you can just respond in that adult fashion, We're talking about the problem instead of the person.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about, hey, when we get talked to this way, or when this happened, or when that happened, this is how we felt. Oftentimes that can recalibrate the relationship. And so it is one of the things to be paying attention to. And we get to decide how we react to things.
Right.
Now you're going to want to feel that wanting to react. But if you can hold back and communicate in that style, that oftentimes can change the dynamics in the interaction.
Yeah. We really want to learn to love them and love ourselves in spite of the flaws that come with being human. There's a quote, always remember that everyone you meet is facing a battle. Our parents are facing their own battles. Our kids are facing their battles. We all have our own things that we deal with, but we're all children of God. We're imperfect, but we're loved. So look for endearing qualities in people. Try to overlook some of the glaring negatives and look for some endearing and positive qualities. And remember that being flawed is part of being human.
Yes.
We're never going to be perfect. And so we have to release the past hurts and really work on viewing our parents through the eyes of compassion. That not only makes us kinder towards them, it can help release us from some of the past hurts that we have. It can help us love them more openly. And it helps us, actually as we accept them, it helps us accept our own shortcomings and the ways that we've failed and the ways that we mess up from time to time.
So we've talked again about things that we can do. A lot of it has to do with respect again. A lot of it has to do with being able to be merciful and see them as humans, being able to manage our idealism and expectations, to be more realistic. And then realize that we can do our part in communicating in the healthiest way possible. That can keep the relationship together, keep us connected. It's okay for the kids to set healthy boundaries,
yes.
And to be very clear. But if you can do it from that adult kind of pattern, is mom and dad, this is what we're asking that would happen here, and so forth. We can enjoy these relationships and stay connected and be able to really thrive together.
Yes.
So hopefully some of this is helpful, whatever season you find yourself in.
Yeah.
So for today, go in peace. Blessings as you go.
The Life and Love Nuggets podcast should not be considered or used for counseling, but for educational purposes only.